Here I am going to talk about the image to image translation topic. So first I will show some interesting application of this image to image translation approach. This is the image image of the winter, and this image is then translated to the image in the summer. So similarly, we can translate the images of the sunny day to the rainy day. This is another application. Similarly, we can translate the images from the zebra to horse and from the horse to the zebra. So these are some of the interesting application of this image to image translation approach. Motivated from the previous image to image translation approaches, we developed a deep learning based architecture which can effectively translate images from one domain to another domain. So what we did actually, we use the encoder uh, of we use variational autoencoder and then encode the input to its latent representation Z, which is represented by this distribution. And similarly, we use another variational autoencoder that take the images from the other domain and then encode it to its corresponding representation, this blue distribution, and then we combine those two distribution here, and then we can just go from one distribution to the next distribution. This is just an abstract representation of our idea. This is the vanilla uh, architecture that we develop from translating one domain to another domain. So x1 is the these are the images from one domain, whereas x2 show the images from the other domain. This architecture project this input to its latent representation z1, and similarly this project this x2 images to its latent representation z2, and then there is an association network which combine these two distribution, and then we use the combined distribution and decode it back to the cross domain images. This is the overall architecture of our image to image translation network, which consists of two variational autoencoder, the first one and the second one, and one association network here. So what we did here, actually we first trained this variational autoencoder by providing the images of one domain, and the target images are also of the same domain. Similarly, in the second step, we train this variational autoencoder by providing the images of the, suppose these are the two domains. One is the aeroplane. Aeroplane is related to the sky. So one domain was the aeroplane and the second domain is the sky images. And in the next step, we train this architecture which is taking sky images as input and generate the sky images as output. Then next step was association, like going from this green distribution to here, and similarly going from this blue distribution to here. So what we did, we use an association network that associate those two distributions. So it take the green distribution as input and generate the blue distribution as output. And this is the combined architecture of this image to image translation network. We trained that network on this letter data set. So this network is successfully translating data from the small letter to the capital letter and from the capital letter to the small letter. So the odd columns are the input to this network, and the even columns are the generated or the translated output of this network. So here the small letter are from one domain and the capital letters are from other domain, and by using the previous approach we can effectively generate the capital letter from the small letter. Similarly, we also use some other data sets, like from aeroplane to sky and from sky back to aeroplane. Similarly, from flower to honeybee, and from honeybee back to the flowers. From cars to the wheels, and from the wheels to the cars. So these were some of the experimental results by using that approach. Uh, Actually, that architecture uh, was successful in translating images from one domain to another domain, but there were two issues. One, the number of parameters were many, and secondly, it was not successful in terms of the corrupted samples. So if there is some missing part in the input images, it was not able to generate its corresponding output images. So what we did, we modified that architecture and we used two different kind of data set, and this is the sketch to the real image data set. One is this handbag data set, and the second one is the shoe data set. So here this architecture, the architecture that we developed, take this sketch image as input and it generate the real 2D images, colored images, RGB images. Similarly, it takes the RGB images input and generate back the sketch images. So this is the architecture, the modified architecture that can translate images from the sketch to the sketch, and from the sketch to the this real image. Similarly, from real to the real this way, and from real to all the way this way to the sketch. So this architecture was able to handle noise as well as corruption in the input images. So suppose these are the real images, these two are the ground truth samples. What we did, we just removed some parts of these input images, like we cut this shoe from here, this is in the middle, from here, this from the top, and we provide this to our network, and our network can generate the full image, even though this part was missing in the input image, but it is generated here. Similarly here, and we also compared this with other approaches. So when we provide these images to the other approaches, those approaches were not able to generate the full image. So here we can clearly see that the missing part are translated to the output. Similarly, we also tested our network with the corrupted inputs. So this is the input target images, this line, and what we did, we drew some lines. So we corrupted these input images by drawing these lines, and when we give it to some other architecture, they generated the corrupted output here, but our network just remove these and generate the proper real representation of those sketch images. Here I am going to show the recorded video of our architecture, like how it can translate the sketch to the real images. So here I am drawing the sketch, and then I will provide this sketch to this network. Here, this is the input image, and this is the real image generated from this network, and we will give this real image back to the network, and it will generate this sketch image, and from sketch image back it generated this real image. Similarly, in the other example, like if the generated real images is not well in the first step, the second step will generate reasonable output. So this is the sketch image which is provided to this architecture, and this architecture generated this real images which is very noisy, and when we provide this back to this network to generate the sketch image, the sketch image is somewhat reasonable, and this is now generating somewhat reasonable output. Similarly, we also use this network to identify the location of the rover in terms of the identifying the location of the rover find the peaks and the valleys in the terrain, and then based on those peaks and valley we can identify the location of the rover. So the rover actually take the 2D images as input, and these are the DEM representation of those 2D images. So we use this architecture to generate the DEM representation of these 2D images. So once we train this network, we provide these 2D images to this architecture, and it generates the corresponding DEM images. And these are the results from our proposed architecture. These are the ground truth and these are the generated images, whereas these are the input images to this network. These are the rover input 2D images. The previous network was able to handle the corruption and noise in the input images up to certain level, but after that, like if the corruption is more, or if we corrupt the image more, or if there is more occlusion in the input images, then it was not able to generate the good quality output images. So what we did as an extension, we took the advantage of the generative adversarial network here, and we also induced the training. Like in the previous architecture, we didn't train the network on the occluded images, but here what we did, suppose this is the input full image, and this is what we did, we randomly occluded the input image and then train this network to generate the full image. So we did two things here. We took the advantage of the generative adversarial network, so we put two discriminators here, as well as we include the training of the missing part of the input image. So this architecture was more robust as compared to the previous one. And here we can see that suppose these are the 2D image, we corrupted those images by drawing some random lines on those images, and similarly we also cut the parts of those images. And here we can see that our proposed approach, these are the results from the proposed approach, that it can accurately recovering the corrupted as well as the occluded images. And these are the results from some other approaches. Like here we can see that this noise is translated here. So the other approaches were not able to accurately recover the images, whereas the proposed approach was able to generate the realistic output images. I also use this image to image translation approach for estimating the depth map from the 2D images. This depth estimation is very important, like in terms of the robot navigation. When the robot is navigating, if it can estimate the depth of the terrain, it can avoid the detour, and it can follow a proper drivable path. So what I did here, I developed an architecture that consists of two generators. One is this generator, and the second one is this generator represented by G2, and this generator is represented by G1. X is the real image as input, and Y is the output depth image. Similarly, Y dash is the output depth image. Similarly, Y is the depth image as input to the second generator, and X dash is the generated real image from this G2 generator. There are actually three generators. There is actually single generator, but it takes the input in different configuration. So as I mentioned, that the discriminator take the real pair or the fake pair, but what I did here, in terms of the real pair, X and Y is real in each combination, XY, XY. There are actually three combinations that are going to this network, and it then classify it into real or fake. Whereas in terms of the fake pair, both the depth and the real images are generated. Similarly, in the second configuration, the RGB image is generated, but the depth map is real. Similarly, in the third configuration, the RGB image is a real one, but the depth map is generated from here. So we use these three different configuration in the same discriminator and train this network, and it was able to uh, generate realistic depth map from the given single RGB image. I tested this depth estimation network on two different kinds of dataset. The first one is the NYU depth dataset. The NYU depth dataset is the indoor different object dataset, whereas the cityscapes dataset is the outside environment dataset that includes different cars, people, and other environments such as buildings, trees, etc. So I use these two datasets to test this architecture, and it was able to generate realistic images. Similarly, we also tested this architecture on our own generated depth dataset that we generated using the RealSense camera, and it was able to generate the depth image of the similar environment. However, if we change the environment, or if we, like, suppose I train it on one kind of environment and I test it on totally different environment, so then in that case the results were not encouraging. And it makes sense because the architecture didn't see those kind of scenes. So there are two possible ways to improve this architecture: either to increase the data so that it can see multiple scenario, or other possible way is we can include some other features such as illumination, environmental conditions. There may be many possible conditions which we can include in this architecture, and we can further improve this work. So this was all about the different image to image translation architecture that I have developed in my research work.